Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 259 of Bill Man the Sport Guys podcast. I'm your host, Bill Man the Sports Guy. Always remember for the latest weekly news of the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, WNBA, this is the podcast to be. So, interesting stuff has been happening in the week of the sports world. So, we're going to go off to number one, which is in Major League Baseball. The Philadelphia Phillies have fired Rob Thomson. That's right. Rob Thomson, who brought the Phillies to a World Series run in 2022, has not gone or even reached the World Series since then. Now, obviously, they did not win the World Series in 2022, as tragically that was to the Houston Astros. However, prior to Rob Thomson being fired, he was fired on Tuesday, April 28th. Prior to that, the last time the Phillies won under Rob Thomson was April 11th. So, calendar-wise, that's about a 2-3 week span because the Phillies went on a 12 game losing streak, but they finally beat the Atlanta Braves 8-5 on April 25th, and then loses again on the 26th. Then he gets fired. So, since Don Mattingly, who is now the interim manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, the Phillies are on they were on a 4 game winning streak. Then they lost yesterday 4-0. And at the time of this recording today, they beat the Miami Marlins by a score of 7-2. And if we go to the standings, the Phillies are 14-20. However, give them credit that they're 6-4 in their last 10 games, but they're 10 games back behind the Atlanta Braves. They did gain a 2.5 advantage on the New York Mets, which we'll get to them in the National League East standings. And even if we were to go to their stats this season, not looking too great among the pitching, even the hitting hasn't been great. One player, Kyle Schwarber, who is one of the greatest designated hitters in today's game of baseball, and 11 home runs. He has an OPS at 915. That's still pretty good. Adolis Garcia hasn't quite picked it up. Justin Crawford's looked okay. Brandon Marsh is actually doing incredible. Alec Boehm, not great. He really needs to get going. Trey Turner also needs to get going. Same with Bryson Stott. Bryce Harper has done okay at best, and JT Realmuto really needs to get going. And even in the bench, Edmundo Sosa, Felix Reyes, Rafael Manchin, Otto King, Garrett Stubbs, they all got to get going. Now, if we go to the pitching, Christopher Sanchez is by far their best pitcher. But after that, Jesus Luzardo, yikes. Aaron Nola, yikes. Andrew Painter, ouch. Taijuan Walker, before getting released by the Philadelphia Phillies earlier, which, that contract was a disaster, even he was not off to a really great start. Then if we go to the bullpen, Brad Keller, not great. Tim Maiza has been fine at best. Johan Duran was awesome before he went to the 15-day IL. Tanner Banks, bad. Jose Alvarado, bad. And I don't think it looks like Zach Wheeler. He's kind of played a little bit, but yikes. And even in the meantime, Zach Wheeler has played this season. Sweet, but only 2 games so far. And, the Phillies, what's wrong with them? They clearly need to get their act together if they want to go on a hot streak and pass the Atlanta Braves and make the playoffs, because it doesn't look like that's going to be happening if this pace that they're currently in stays up. Is Don Mattingly the answer? I don't know. But it certainly sounds like the players got a wake-up call after Rob Thomson was fired. But in the end, I think the Phillies just need to start playing more smarter, better baseball, and the pitching outside of Christopher Sanchez has to get their act together if they want to make it to the postseason and even bring a World Series for the first time since 2008. So those are my thoughts on that, and you can always let me know your thoughts and opinions on Twitter at Billman Sports and Instagram at Billman Sports Guy, and here on YouTube at Billman Sports Guy. Now another baseball team I want to talk about, which is the New York Mets, because goodness golly gosh, what is happening in Queens, New York? I mean, seriously. Sure, at the time of this recording, they are beating the Los Angeles Angels 2-1, top of the fifth. But they're dead last in the NL East at 11-22 record. They're 12 and a half games back behind the Atlanta Braves for first place. I mean, seriously. Excuse me. While Clay Holmes is currently doing pretty good for the Mets, but in the end, what is happening? Because the Mets, let's not forget, they got swept by the Colorado Rockies. They did not do great against the Twins. They barely got away with the second and third game in that series in the previous two. But then the Nationals, they won the first game 8-0. Good for them. But then the Nationals spanked their butts and beat them 14-2. Then they beat them again 5-4. So, but they're doing okay against the Angels. They won Friday 4-3, lost 4-3 yesterday. Today they're beating them 2-1. And you know what? While we're at it, let's actually go ahead and look at the stats. And one question I want to throw out is, can somebody remind me why Carlos Mendoza is still there? Even after the Red Sox bad start and firing of Alex Cora, I literally thought Mendoza was going to be the next one, but it looks like I was wrong. And another thing I was looking at was that the Mets apparently are not planning on firing him, which is horrendous call. And let's see, Francisco Alvarez, not good. Mark Vientos, he's doing pretty bad. Marcus Semien, who they got in the offseason for Brendan Nimmo, doing okay defensively, but offensively, horrendously bad. Francisco Lindor, he's been hurt. He's also not off to a good start. Bo Bichette is not doing perfect at all. It's crazy that Juan Soto, who's played 18 games, is looking like by far their best hitter because everyone else is not even doing that great. Now, even if we look at the pitching, Clay Holmes is awesome. Dare I say their best pitcher by far this season. Noah McClain has looked solid. Freddie Peralta looks meh at best. David Peterson, bad. Kodai Senga before hitting the IL, bad. Devin Williams has not done great. Neither has Tobias Meyer. Actually, Tobias Meyer has done great. I take that back. Luke Weaver, he's done horrendously bad as well. Brooks Raley, good. Mark Husker Brabozen, I apologize if I said it wrong. He looks really, really good in the short sample size. But Sean Manaea, yikes, off to a really bad start. Richard Loveday, okay. Craig Kimbrell, bad. Christian Scott, bad. Luis Garcia, bad. Carl Edwards Jr., before he got DFA'd, he was actually doing pretty good for the Mets. Austin Warren, okay. And Joey Gabber, fine at best. So, what do the Mets need to do? They're the two teams that really need to get going because the performance they're putting out on and off the field is so unacceptable. Now, is David Stearns also to blame? Because let's not forget, Edwin Diaz, Pete Alonso, both of them left. Edwin Diaz signed with the Dodgers, Pete Alonso signed with the Orioles. And both are actually doing pretty bad with their teams. But do the Mets need to fire Carlos Mendoza? I really think they do because if he stays on the Mets for the rest of the season, and if they finish with, let's say, what if they even reach 2024 Chicago White Sox and 2025 Colorado Rockies bad? Yeah. I think David Stearns needs to be in the hot seat. Same with Carlos Mendoza. They do not have a good staff that is helping the Mets winning ball games. That's barely been happening at times. In fact, the Mets are last. Not even Not even in just the division, but goodness golly gosh. I mean, seriously, they just stink. It's that simple. To where the Pirates, who are in last place, even the San Francisco Giants are doing better. And let's take a look at the American League East. Boston Red Sox are actually doing better than the Mets. Same with the Kansas City Royals. Even the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. That is so embarrassing. Even the Washington Nationals, who are not supposed to be good this year, heck, they're doing a lot better than the New York Mets. And you know who's also doing better than the New York Mets? The Chicago White Sox. Yeah, I said it. I said it. The White Sox are doing better than the Mets. So, New York Met fans, and before I even add, there was a tweet I saw. I wish I kept it, but I didn't. Somebody tweeted that the Nationals in 2019 went 19-31 and went on a World Series run. And shout out to Frank from Barstool Sports because, man, I feel it. Trust me, Frank. If you're listening to this, I was literally in your shoes when the Chicago White Sox were really bad in 2024. I mean, it was the worst. It was so painful to even watch the games at times, but man, the Mets really need to get going. I mean, I'm serious. Literally, everybody has to be better. And even Carlos Mendoza has to get his act together if he wants to stick around with the Mets this season. Because if this keeps up, surely enough, the Mets front office will be pressured to fire Carlos Mendoza. And I wouldn't be shocked if that was the case. So let's go to the NHL. Because there's a couple that's really happening. The biggest news that has happened as of recently, and one that I'm scratching my head on, the Toronto Maple Leafs have hired John Chayka and Matt Sundin as part of their next general manager and senior vice president operations. Matt Sundin, fine hiring. I mean, Leafs legend. I think he'll do fine. But it's John Chayka I'm really having a hard time understanding. So John Chayka was the former general manager of the Arizona Coyotes. And the Leafs have announced that he's general manager. And now, Chayka was general manager in 2016 and managed up until like right before the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs, which the Coyotes, obviously, long before they relocated to Utah to become the Utah Mammoth, they were not having good seasonal stats. And the thing I don't understand is Chayka abruptly resigned on July 26, 2020, just one day before the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs. And the thing I also don't understand, in January 25th, 2021, Chayka was suspended from working in the NHL for the remainder of the 2021 calendar year. As Gary Bettman cited conduct terminal to the league and the game, and further ruled out that Chayka had breached his obligation to the club by pursuing opportunities with other clubs while still under contract with the Arizona Coyotes. Chayka and the Coyotes were later revealed to have hosted a private scouting combine for draft prospects, which is strictly forbidden by the NHL. The Coyotes were significantly forced to forfeit their second round selection in the 2020 NHL draft and the first round pick in the 2021 draft. And as of May 3rd, today, he's been hired. I don't understand this move from the Toronto Maple Leafs perspective because they're a team that not only has to make the playoffs, but get past the first round. The Leafs have not won a Stanley Cup since 1967. And adding John Chayka, I think it's really going to make it worse. Right now, the Maple Leafs have solid players. They have a young star in Matthew Knies. Austin Matthews is still there. William Nylander's still there. Jesper Woll is still there. Morgan Riley's still there in Toronto. John Tavares. I could go on. But who are some of the greatest players the Coyotes have ever had since, Clayton Keller, Shane Doan? Heck, I don't blame you because I'm having a hard time listing some. Jacob Chitrin, but that's probably about it. But for the Leafs, if the Leafs keep failing to miss the playoffs, then bye-bye Morgan Riley, bye-bye Austin Matthews, bye-bye William Nylander, because John Chayka, just like he did with the Arizona Coyotes, I really have a fear that he's truthfully going to burn the Maple Leafs to the ground. And I'm honestly not looking forward to that. Not just to see them fail, but also I feel it for the fan base. They've been through so much as being a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And right now, I don't know what they were thinking because I really don't think John Chayka is going to do well. I think the Leafs are going to get worse from there. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what it looks like. I mean, I really can't understand. So, in the end, I don't like this hiring at all. I just think it's going to make the Maple Leafs a lot worse and not even watchable at this point. To the point where Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Morgan Riley, they might as well leave in free agency when their contracts are up, that is. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers because I got some thoughts on them. So the Edmonton Oilers, who made the playoffs and got eliminated in the first round by the Anaheim Ducks. So the Edmonton Oilers, to no surprise, Connor McDavid, 82 games played, 48 goals, 90 assists for 118 points, that or 138 points. Still not shocked. Then Leon Draisaitl, 65 games played, 35 goals, 62 assists for 97 points. Evan Bouchard, the defenseman, 21 goals for 95 points, along with 74 assists in 82 games played. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's still going solidly strong in Edmonton after all those years. In 72 games played, 20 goals, 36 assists for 56 points. Zach Hyman, 58 games played, 31 goals, 21 assists for 52 points. Honorable mentions will go to Matthias Ekholm, 82 games played, 6 goals, 35 assists for 41 points. Velasi Bakozin, 82 games played, 19 goals, 18 assists for 37 points. Matt Savoy, 82 games played, 18 goals, 19 assists for 37 points. Jack Roslovic, 69 games played, 21 goals, 15 assists for 36 points. Not too shabby. And Darnell Nurse ranks out the top 10 in 82 games played with 7 goals, 17 assists for 24 points. But if we go to the goaltenders, that was a bit interesting. Calvin Pickard started 13 out of 16 games played. He went 5-6-2 with a 368 goals against, 871 save percentage. Connor Ingram, who was overall solid for Edmonton, went starting 30 out of his 32 games played, went 16-10-3 with a 260 goals against and an 899 save percentage, that is. And Tristan Jarry, who they got in the swap for Stuart Skinner, started 29 out of 33 games, 18-9-3 with a 332 goals against, 882 save percentage. Now, if we go to the playoffs, because this is where I'm going to go with it. So Connor Ingram, 2-3-0 in 5 games played, 386 goals against, 876 save percentage. Tristan Jarry lost the only game he started with the 384 goals against, 895 save percentage. Then if we go to the skaters, Leon Draisaitl, 10 points. Evan Bouchard, 7. Kasperi Kapanen, 6. Valzy Podkozin had 6. Connor McDavid, 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 5 points in 6 games. Jake Wallman had 4 assists. Jason Dickinson had a couple goals and assists for 3 points. Same with Connor Murphy. Even Zach Heinem, couple goals. Josh Szymanski, a goal and assist. And Matthias Ekholm, 2 assists, along with Colton Dach, 1 assist. So, yeah. Who do the Edmonton Oilers try to get in the offseason in terms of goalie wise? Because one of the biggest problems I see with the Oilers is goaltending was such mediocre all season long. And even in the playoffs, goaltending was not a big help whatsoever. And the last player I want to talk about, Connor McDavid. There are so many reports that he might leave the Edmonton Oilers. So I have to ask this, Oiler fans, and I'm sorry, but does Connor McDavid leave Edmonton? Not only did he get eliminated in the first round, but in the last 2 years, when the Oilers went to the Stanley Cup Finals, McDavid lost both times. And, 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points in 6 games, but he was also playing a bit hurt. And McDavid, 48 goals, 90 assists for 138 points in 82 games played with a plus 17 That's still really good. And even if we look at Connor McDavid's career, he has won the Art Ross Trophy 6 times. He did win the Conn Smythe in 2024. He won 3 Hart Memorials, 1 Rocket Richard, 4 Ted Lindsay Awards, no Stanley Cup to show for. And career wise, 794 games played, 409 goals, 811 assists for 1,220 points. Then, if we go to the postseason, Connor McDavid, his career 102 games played, 45 goals, 111 assists for 156 points with a plus 23. But McDavid was specifically a -8. That is pretty bad. And while Connor McDavid did sign a 2-year, $15 million extension with the Oilers, but in the end, are the Oilers going to move on from him? Because the Oilers, I can't tell you how many first round picks the Oilers have had. In the 2010s, they had Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Jordan Eberle, Nail Yakupov, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid. And yet, no Stanley Cup to show for since the Wayne Gretzky days. If the Oilers, let's say they miss the playoffs the next 2 seasons, then I think Connor McDavid is gone as good. But if the Oilers do win a Stanley Cup, then I could maybe see McDavid want to stick around. So in the end, I think Connor McDavid will stick around with Edmonton unless if Edmonton fails miserably the next 2 years and not even dare try to bring a Stanley Cup. But in the end, I want to see Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup, and I don't know if the Oilers will be the answer. Should he leave the Edmonton Oilers? If this stuff like this keeps happening in Edmonton, then I would say yes in an instant heartbeat. All right, this concludes today's episode number 259 of Bill Man the Sport Guys podcast. I'm your host, Bill Man the Sports Guy. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Stay tuned for episode number 260. Peace.